for sitting in for Louise Wibbleman, our normal chair. Appreciate it. Second off, like to remind everybody that there is a vote. 5 affirmative votes is needed to pass anything tonight. It is for those appointed to the board, not those present. So it's a majority, but it's a majority of 9, so it's 5. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled Historic District Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 6th. Our first call to order is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone care to make a motion for the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, just a brief comment on the minutes. This is our first time we finally got somebody that takes the minutes off of these recordings. We had November 4th, September 4th, September 18th, October 2nd minutes, even though they were on the agenda, were not there. So the motion should reflect only the 4th and the 18th, and your October 2nd minutes will come with your next set. But we have somebody that's doing this on a regular basis for us now, so thankfully that is. But if you have any comments or questions.
Anybody have any comments or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none.
I have one question.
Sure.
This was kind of slipped in between the minutes and the agenda, or the,
It's just a nothing thing.
building department.
Yeah, if you got it, it's just an odd piece of paper.
Okay, this is a non-NA.
It's a non-issue.
Okay. Just wonder if it pertained to anything.
It's a secretarial error.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes for September 4th and September 18th.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So tonight, looks like we have one application. So this is the proposed addition by Heller and Associates to the Cyber residence located at 26637 York. And if I see the applicants here, the floor is yours.
I'm sure you've all had a chance to, good evening, Ben Heller, Heller and Associates. I know you all have had a chance to review our proposal. We tried to take, we did take guidance from the board, went back to the plans and kind of tried to take a fresh look at it and made some changes to try to comply with some of what you guys were saying and still be in balance with the house and attempt to try to get this addition through. What we did, there was, on the site plan, there was one thing that actually didn't get amended on the site plan we turned in. But one of the changes that we did, obviously we know that it's very thin. You know, we have about 2.5 more feet in our allowable width on the house. However, the way the house is currently placed, to build an addition behind the house, we have to stay within a certain width to allow for the garage to operate, which is the current problem we have, why we're removing the addition that was previously approved by the historical board that flushed out with the side over here. We're removing that addition to allow the garage to work, and once you do that, you're left with a very narrow space to create a room still. However, we did push the chimney over an additional 6 inches to accommodate the idea of having it be less to the side yard and having it step in further. So that puts us, that puts us 8.1 feet. We're only about 12 inches differential. You know, when you step back the 5 feet to where the chimney is, we're only 12 inches differential from the plane of the wall. So that was one thing that we changed. And the other adjustment was something that took into account, and I put it on, what I ended up doing, this is the entire petition, the proposal. What I did on this drawing to make it a little easier to understand, and I know it's hard to see, like architectural drawings are drawn in flat, when in reality life is in 3D, And so you never really view a building in the way you see it on a drawing. However, when you come up to the house, you can't, this is the front elevation is actually here. This is the front elevation, and so when you come to the house, you can see the side, you look down the property line. And previously, we had a shed dormer, which, and this is just slightly stepped back from this wall, and so you have a vertical face of this roof. And of course, we have a 7'6" wall from inside, the height there that the windows go to. Well, in the effort to, when you look down the driveway, to get the addition to feel less sizable and less massive of roof, we changed this to be a 1.5-story roof like so, dropping the wall height way down, losing the siding completely, and now the roof goes from a lower height away from you. So, and that's where you look on the back, you now have this element instead of the shed coming down. So again, this was the side elevation before. This view is here. So before we had this shed roof, like it is now today actually. There is a shed roof that was built at some point. So we would remove that shed roof. And so in combination of losing the octagon room back here, getting that corner to properly open up, dropping this down from the existing shed piece that's here, you are actually going to have, in terms of looking at the historical house and looking down the side yard, in my view, you'll actually see the historical house separated better, and the addition will be less massive than it is today, in the view that everybody has looking down the street. And then, of course, on the narrow side of the lot, on the non-driveway side, I should say, where the house is set in over 2 feet from our allowable setback, which is this side, the addition is very modest. The walls, again, are not too, the square footage rule allows for 8-foot walls wherever, and that's where they measure to the outside wall. However, we built 5-foot walls. We're using, in an effort to keep it low and keep it subtle. That's been our petition since the beginning, to allow the addition to be less in comparison to the original house. And so with that, I would turn it over. You can see the rear elevation now with the double gable back here, as opposed to the shed just has a lower roof mass in there. With that, I would turn it over for any questions to the board.
So, obviously, at this point in time, Hank, would you like to share your review, please?
Yes. Let me just get to it. If I could just use this, it might be a little bit easier.
And Hank, while you're doing that, could you, don't forget to please explain that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm gonna explain a couple things while I'm setting this up, just so you know. The document that you received prior to, opening the meeting tonight, which was this one, was written by one of the board members, and he will be happy to answer any questions that you might have concerning it. That's the one thing. The other thing I want to do is take the opportunity to introduce Beth Sorella, who is here from Rosati Schultz, our city attorney's office, who is sitting here to my right. So if you have any questions, you should also feel free to ask her on this. So basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this a little bit easier so that people could understand, kind of, not that Ben didn't explain it well, but I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstandings. This right here is the chimney that has been pushed back in 6 inches. So that now goes 6 inches further into the addition. These openings are still the same on the side, so basically your wall is the chimney on the first floor. These walls here are the walls that came down from 8 feet to 5 feet. Ben, correct me if there's anything that I'm missing here. So this part here is the siding, which is a different type of siding than this, so it's differentiating the old from new. And this elevation back here was where the shed roof came down. So what he had done here was he took down, matched the ends of the rake boards here, went up and introduced another gable here rather than the shed roof that went across the whole thing. This area here, except for the drop, has actually remains pretty much the same. This area here is the front of the house. This is the view from the driveway side. The thing to remember too is the addition that is not here already came out to about here. So there's an addition on there that would be coming off that went to about here.
Yeah.
This elevation here is not changing. The sliver of the other chimney that you see is right here, and the material is made stone instead of the brick to help differentiate the old from new. So that's where this one goes. It meets the maximum house size, it meets the height requirements, it meets the setback requirements for both side yards and rear yard. The front yard has not been touched. It does need a variance for 78 square feet, which is the province of the Zoning Board of Appeals. On this particular elevation, if you take a look here, he has, the windows all have the same mutton bars and the same pattern, to the extent that it can, and this area here has been tried to have been minimized. Other than that, if you have any questions on that, here's the floor plan that you can see here. Most of the addition, as you can see, is being added, is here. This is the lanai for the first floor. This is the second floor plan. All these changes, with the exception of back here, are interior changes.
Can I help with that? Because I think
You can absolutely help with
If
that.
I could just show
I
that.
would love you to.
Because I think how do I push this button? Like
Just push the green button and you'll get
I
it.
think it could help is that this is the existing house is out further here, right? So we're removing this portion, and then the existing house steps back. This is the existing back wall here. So when we talk about an addition, this is what we've added to the main level, and we removed a chunk. There's a whole area that came off here because it doesn't allow the garage to work. It's flush with the existing wall while we're stepped in. And so I thought it was important to point that out, and it
Yeah,
kind of
maybe-
moves.
I can't blow this up anymore, but, well, maybe I can. Okay, that probably is a little more helpful.
Yeah, and, well, again, yeah, you can see, here's the addition that's being removed, right? This is that room we were just talking about, that's what we've added, and then this is the other space that's been added. The rest of this is existing. And I know sometimes when you look at plans, you're not sure what's there and what's new, but I'm hoping this helps to see that this isn't a massive, huge addition. We're just trying to work with what we've got, and this line, this dash line here, that's our real setback line. This is our allowable, buildable space. So like a architectural feature like a chimney can actually project 2 feet past that, or 18 inches past that. We're actually, several feet inside of our allowable setback in this proposal. And it's really, you see how close this garage is, absolutely gorgeous. And it's clearly an Albert Kahn design. And, the intention here is, even though it's right on top of the house, is to come up with, to develop a house where they could use their garage and still have this beautiful, use the house, but use the garage also and still maintain the beautiful garage without altering it. And I think the success of this was that we were able to do that. However, this is not a real cost-effective project because we got to actually tear out living space to allow that to happen. But currently, it's a non-functional garage, so it's either proposed to tear it down, do something. Something's got to happen because it's not a functional property at the time. So, with that, I turn it back over.
Thank you. Basically, that's it. Again, it meets the requirements for the zoning ordinance. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer to the extent that I can, and I'm sure Mr. Heller would also be happy to answer. If you have any legal questions, Ms. Sorella is here and would be happy to also answer those for you. I'll leave this, well, actually, let me leave this one up in case anybody has any questions or wants to refer to it.
So I guess at this point in time, let's, if any of the Historic District Commission has questions. Steve, why don't we just start with you and we'll go from end to end?
I really don't have any questions. I thought the plan was great last time, but I see how this has addressed some of the issues that were raised, not of mine, but I can see from the change of the roof style, that you've lowered the walls on both sides of the house and created a softer, less prominent look to it. And I've thought all along it's been a great project, and I still think it's a great project, and I really can't see how it really varies from any of the
I appreciate your explanation, and I appreciate your, changing the back massing and proportion of the addition. It does improve it.
Thank you.
My turn?
It is.
Thank you. I like the changes. I've, some questions. In the center of the house, there's a fireplace, a new fireplace. How is that vented?
That would just be a direct vent fireplace. We're not taking it. It'll be it can come up through the roof probably. We haven't decided where it's gonna vent exactly, but it's a PVC pipe. It's a small air pipe, basically.
Would
It's
it-
not a, there's not a chimney with it.
Would it be vented through the side of the house?
Probably not, due to the circumstance. We probably wanna take it up, probably put it, probably the best place to put it would be, cause it can move, basically, it doesn't have to go straight. It'll probably go in that shed between the two gables where no one would even see it, on the back side of the ridge.
The shed that
Right
you're,
Yeah, up in that area would be the best.
the shed that you're speaking of removing is the existing shed?
Yes, yep.
Is that not an original feature of the house?
I do not believe so. That's an addition there to the back of the house.
I'd like to check the drawings on that. I believe that.
It's got, if you look at the dormer in the front, it's got basically a flat roof. I'd never seen Albert Kahn do anything with like a big pitch, like a shed dormer like you see all over Huntington Woods. I don't believe that would have been something would be part of the original house.
I'd like to have a determination on that, because if that's an original feature, that can't be touched. It has to remain in place, and that's standard number 9. It says new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. Old and new will be compatible with the historic material features, size, scale, proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and the environment. And that certainly falls in that category, and that's an original, if that is an original feature, that needs to stay as it is.
Do we have a photograph?
Yeah, can you
I'm
show a
just would
photograph?
like to know what we're.
You might be able
We're
to help.
talking about this.
Hang on.
That's even
Like,
possible.
Shed right down.
This right here.
Yeah. We have copies of it. Yeah.
This is what you have here. This is the as-built that I have for this right
So you're talking about this right here. That's the
Let
door
me-
on the back.
now. Let me turn this light off.
Yes. Yeah, that part, and, yes, that shed, and if that shed is part of the original structure, that needs to stay in place. It can't be altered.
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, the way that the standards and guidelines are written, it should be that it's in an inconspicuous side of the house, or additions are allowed on the rear of the house. So it does allow for additions to the rear of the property.
It's on the side, the removal of distinctive materials or alterations of space, features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize the property will be avoided.
So I guess I just wanna clarify how these standards, the standards are really written in a broad manner because they're written by the federal government. They need to apply, all across the United States and then be taken down into each community and applied on a case-by-case basis. So in this case, then they're adopted by our state law, and the state law then allows us to adapt further guidelines that are more specific to your community, which the city has also guidelines to try to interpret a little bit more, these broad general guidelines that the IRS has put out there. So you have adopted more guidelines to try to get down to what is appropriate for your area for additions. Now, this number 9 doesn't say, it's a broad general rule. It doesn't say that nothing can be removed or changed. And then you have, what it says is that shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. That doesn't specifically say that nothing can be changed or removed. Historic materials could be what the house is broadly made out of. It could be interpreted as a lot of things, and what the city has had to do is take a broader, look at the broad rule and try to narrow it down for what is appropriate for your area for additions.
With all due respect, again, if that was the thing, that no addition could ever be put on a historic house. And that was not the intent.
But isn't the interpretation of those rules up to the individuals here on the commission? I mean, isn't that why there is a commission?
It is, go
But it
ahead.
has to be based on a reason that's based in the rule itself. So if you go to the federal standards, which are codified in 36 CFR 67.7, you have to look at how that's qualified by the federal government. So subsection B, before you get even into the broad rule, says the following standards are to be applied to specific rehabilitation projects in a reasonable manner. So that means you have to have a reason based on what, you have a reason based in fact, applied to the broad standard. You have to be able to articulate why you think it is that way. What is your factual reason for saying that that's how it needs to be applied? So it needs to be articulated factually with respect to the rule. And it says, and taking into consideration economic and technical feasibility.
We're not qualified to do that. We can't go into their finances, and
We
we're
don't
not
know what
technicians.
That's what the rules require you to take a look at factually though. Look at the broad, this is the broad rule, and the rule has to be applied so that it's applied reasonably and that it's applied feasibly.
Well, recently I then cite also in addition standard 4, standard 5. Additionally, standards 4 and 5. These all address historic materials, construction, features.
It might
And the
help.
language is will be preserved. It's very specific. It's will, it's not may.
The rule doesn't say that nothing can be removed. It says materials shall be preserved, and I believe the intent is that the addition should be consistent generally with what is there.
I might be able to help. That dormer, by the way,
Yes.
has all new cedar siding on it that was put on within the last 10 years. It's not old, there's nothing historical on that addition from an exterior cladding standpoint. They're newer windows, it's newer, the non-even butt cedar siding, cedar shake siding that's on that addition, you know, that stagger butt rather. And I can tell, because I've used the stuff, that it's something of that they've gotten from a lumber yard in the last 10 years or so.
Hey, just a matter of procedure, my apologies, because I want to respect that each individual has a time to speak. So is this an appropriate time for other people to interject, or should we go around?
Why don't
When
you
does the
go around
dialogue
and let
happen?
everybody make their
Because I want
comments,
to make
and
sure we're
then
respectful.
make
and
sure-
you can tell your
Okay.
comments.
as long as you make sure that everybody gets their comments out and everything like that, that would be appropriate.
We've
Thanks,
got
I
lots of
just
time.
Want to make sure I understand the rules.
Plenty of time.
Okay. You're still,
No, we can move on.
oh, okay, I just want to make sure you got everything, because I
No,
didn't want
we can
you
come
to,
back to me,
your
don't worry.
flow to get done and, okay, so.
Okay.
I just want to say thanks for and your comments about the garage are spot on, so I appreciate the effort that you're going through as the applicant to with no shortage of difficulty, to make sure that garage stays intact. So I think that's really important. I appreciate that. I would also, in my architectural opinion, agree that there's nothing distinctive about the shed dormer that's there, nor we haven't, I think we've discussed at previous meetings that the octagonal addition is non-contributing as well. I would put that dormer in the same category, even if they weren't built at the same time. I don't think that's my only other, yeah, that's all my comments. Thank you.
I have a question for Ben
Yes, sir.
regarding standard number 10. New additions shall be undertaken in a manner that if removed in the future the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. Now, we've talked about that before, and that standard is almost hypothetical because of how rare it is for an addition to be removed. But this is one of those rare cases where a non-historic addition is being removed. Where that is being removed, can and will that space be restored to its original condition?
Yes. I mean,
So it would be reasonable to say that if this addition were removed, it too could be restored.
because what they did originally is they planed the addition out flush with the sidewall and the driveway. And so we're removing that, and we're actually stepping it back in with our proposal. And every spot we're starting against the house is either a reverse gable laying back on the roof, or it's a stepped-in element. So I guess to that extent, it could literally come off, and the house would be there, as it was. Yes, so yes.
Okay. That's it for now.
Thank you.
I think it's definitely an improvement from last time.
And then as a matter of procedure, Hank, am I allowed to say anything?
Yes, as a matter of procedure, you just go last, and this is
Oh,
last.
you know what, I didn't address what Robert had to say. The argument you made about removing historical materials, and you're talking about that roof section, I believe, it makes no sense whatsoever. Putting on an addition inherently involves removing original material. So how can you how can you say this little piece of the roof can't be removed, even though you're taking away half the back side of the house?
Because additions go on the back side, and this is prominent from the side.
Even so, is it gonna, look at the bottom, highlighted section.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, for procedure, the comment should go through the chair. So if Mark can speak, Robert can readdress it, but there shouldn't be a cross.
Shouldn't be a dialogue.
If you look at the bottom highlighted section of this discussion of the law,
Where are you?
this document here.
Okay.
And for Mr. McMullen's and Mr. Hauser's sake, I will read it. The Secretary of the Interior standards are rules and regulations. Quote, a project meets the standards when the overall effect of all work on the property is one of consistency with the property's historic character. The guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings are intended to assist in applying the standards, but they are not codified as program requirements, end quote. And I quote from the National Park Service, which is the mouthpiece for the Department of the Interior.
Thank you.
Robert, would you like to
No
address any of those
response?
comments?
No.
I would just like to thank the applicants for continuing to work with the city and to address, listen to the comments that we have and make a lot of effort to address those. Looking at what you've done in terms of matching, lowering the roof lines to, again, we talked about massiveness of the addition so that it is not out of scale with the historic structure and does not overpower. I think your improvements have successfully done that. I think your addition is highly consistent with the property's historic character. I think that when we really look at this property, to me, the defining features are actually more on the front side of this. We've talked about the brick in the past. You've done a good job of preserving that in your improvements. A very unusual screened-in front porch on the front of the house. The roof lines that you've matched, I think, are part of the historic character of the house with the gable effect, the dormer effect. So again, I think from a consistency standpoint, you've done an excellent job. I think one of the most qualified people to comment on this addition is Hank as the city administrator, and has done a thorough review of this. And I'd like to note that he has, in his notes, has indicated that this meets is very closely aligned with most of our standards. I think it's a phenomenal addition. At this point in time, hearing no other comments from the commission, it's an opportunity for the public to speak. Please, if you're going to speak, come up to the podium, clearly state your name and address.
Good evening, Christian Hauser, Hauser, on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Sandy McMullen, who live adjacent to the applicant. This is the third time we're here. This is the third time that we have been before the board to discuss our concerns with the proposed modification to the structure. And I would certainly point again to standard number 9. I'm not going to re-argue all the statements I made last time. You've heard them all. But when we look at number 9 and we look at the part of that says the new work shall be differentiated from the old, shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. Okay, when I was here last time, I discussed the broad and narrow interpretation of "in its environment." And the argument that I made was, if we want to look at a narrow interpretation, it would certainly be the impact that it has to adjacent property owners. If we want to look from a broad perspective, it would be the entire neighborhood. Okay. There's no doubt that there have been modifications to the proposal since we were here last time. There's no doubt that there have been alterations in recognition of the fact of certain aesthetics. As far as I'm concerned, and from what I have seen, there's been no modification or alteration or reduction in the size, scale, and mass of this proposed modification to the structure. And we know that because, by their own admission, they would have to seek a variance through the zoning board in order for this to be implemented, in order for this to be approved. So from our position, the aesthetic is what the aesthetic is. I can't control the design features that the applicant and their design professional have chosen to put into this addition. However, it doesn't take away from the size, the mass, the scale, and the impact that that has in the neighborhood, and in particular, the historical district of the neighborhood. And does this modification, does this alteration of the house in its current form change the landscape, change the environment of that neighborhood, which this board was, for all intents and purposes, formed to protect and maintain? I know Mr. McMullen has some comments, and I'm sure he would like to address the board as well. Thank you.
Richard McMullen, 26645 York. The premise is next to the, where the project is happening. I've never seen Groundhog Day, the movie, but this certainly, I know what it's about, and this kind of feels like it. And I don't have the eye or the expertise that many of you in the room have. What I take from it is that nothing has changed that would lessen the impact of this large addition on us. Adjustments, minor adjustments, tweaks, changes in the materials used are of no consequence to me since they make no difference to the overall size. And I'm not sure how to read some of these things, but I think that changes have taken place on the other side of the house that doesn't face my house. I'm not sure about that, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if that's not right. You know, the letter comes out, those are my comments. This is sort of a separate comment. The invitation comes out to appear before the commission. You're invited to view the plans and present your thoughts to the Historic Commission at the meeting. And this is my third time doing that. I'm a longtime resident. I've I've left one part out that I want to go back to. In the applicant's comments to the board at the last time, the lady made a statement that she really likes this place, which we all do, and looks forward to growing old here. Well, we've already done that, and we don't want to spend the remainder of our time here boxed in and dominated by the size of this addition. Back to the letter, you're invited here. I've come here 3 times, and I hope I was professional and polite. I have done nothing wrong, and I neither deserve nor appreciate the dismissive, condescending, and disrespectful tone and comments that have been directed to me from up there. I just think that I need to say that to you, and those are my comments. Hank, can I pass that picture on?
Yeah, you can. If there's something you might, why don't you describe what you want it to depict, and then if you wouldn't mind starting with Steve Behrman,
Sure.
right? They can pass around, then it'll end up with me.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to keep it.
Yeah, that's okay. This is a picture that I took from my side of the fence, obviously, and in it you will see the previous addition that was put on there and which is coming down. And I measured out the 21 feet, which I believe is the correct distance. Is that the correct distance or not, Mr. Helen?
Am I supposed to answer that? Should I answer that question?
I'm sorry, can I? I measured out the distance that I believe this addition will extend to. And,
If he wants to answer it, you're not obligated to.
okay, well, so the marker is where it will be extended to from my property. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak?
Through the chair, just to make some clarification comments back on, in considering the standards and how to look at some of the standards, going back to that subsection B of 36 CFR 67.7, and having to take consideration of the standards by looking at the projects in a reasonable manner, and you have to look at the reasons for an opinion on something, making an opinion that it's not consistent with the standard. So in just considering comments such as that we're not meeting standard number 9, there needs to be a factual reason provided that it's not consistent with the massing, size, scale, and architecture. Here we've had an opinion that I don't think it's consistent with the massing, size, and scale. I don't feel it is, but factual reasons have not been provided to show that it is not consistent with the massing, size, and scale. So that's something that the board should take into consideration. Was there a factual basis to provide that the massing isn't consistent with the property or the area or surrounding architecture, the architecture of that? And that's the type of reasonable determination where you're needing to look at factual reasons when applying the standard.
Seeing as there's no more public participation, the applicants have an opportunity to respond to any of the comments or the public input or any comments that we've had. Do you have anything else to say?
The last comment I would make is something to take into consideration. You guys drive down the street, and you can probably see because the addition blocks them out of their garage, they park their cars in the driveway. And so part of allowing this is going to allow that to not happen anymore. So now the cars will be properly placed in the garage, that you won't have this clutter in the front yard. So I'd leave it with that. And then the other comment about the 21 feet thing, keep in mind that the other side of the house is what sticks out now, and we're cutting that back, and we're kind of moving the addition to the side of the other side of the property to allow the home to work with the garage in the backyard, and preventing us from doing that would keep them pickled out of their garage and keep them parked in their street, basically.
Thank you. So at this point in time, public participation and discussion from the applicant is now closed, and I'd like to, on this side. If there's any other final comments from the commission, now's our time to have our discussion.
Questions for Mr. McMullen? Which I'd like to preface with a summary of the arguments that you've made. First of all, you objected to the sufficiency of notice at the first hearing. Yet you were given all the notice required by law, and you had time to fly home from Dublin and attend the meeting. As a matter of law, your attendance proves that you had sufficient notice. You objected to interference with light and air. We have established that that position has no legal merit. You objected to loss of view of other people's backyards. We have established that there is no legal right to review. You've objected to the size of the proposed addition. We have established that the plan comports with the size and setback requirements of the zoning ordinance. I believe that your final argument was that the Seaboards knew when they bought the house that they knew what they were getting. So let me ask you a hypothetical question. And let's assume that that was a vacant lot, okay? Let's assume that John Jones buys the vacant lot. And let's assume that John Jones presents plans to build a house I'm asking a hypothetical question. Don't
Can you
interrupt
go
me.
through the chairperson, please,
Yeah.
and follow the rules?
All right, I'm going to the chair.
Thank you.
So just,
Will
it's
the
a
chair-
commentary, and
Will the chair allow me to ask a question, a hypothetical question of the applicant?
I think this isn't really, is
Could you
this,
phrase it as a statement?
and is this really a dialogue, or this is
shouldn't be
our?
It shouldn't be a
Because
dialogue.
Okay,
that
then
dialogue is
let me
closed.
address this to the chair.
Make some statements about
Take
your
this assumption
position.
that the lot next door is vacant. John Jones buys the vacant lot. Then John Jones presents plans to build a house identical to the original Albert Kahn plan, or as the house exists today. Would it be objectionable that Jones knew when he bought the house, bought the lot, that there was no house on it? He can't build? See where I'm going with this?
No, I don't.
That's, again, if you have,
May-
Mr. Chair, you
I
may,
am over my head here, because I thought
Okay.
that the dialogue was supposedly closed, so can someone please advise me on how
So,
we're supposed
so
to
there
treat
shouldn't
a
be any
dialogue?
comments from the public at this point, and any comments should be addressed to the board and the chair.
Okay,
So,
now,
obviously, these should be then statements of your understanding of position or your comments.
okay, now
Would be appreciated.
I spent a substantial amount of time in the last 3 or 4 days doing the research on the law and going through with a fine-tooth comb the standards and the guidelines. And I don't see a single thing in there that remotely resembles a requirement that the neighbors be happy about it, that you avoid making the neighbors unhappy. The neighbors object to it with no legal grounds. I can't see why Mr. McMullins is even here.
I got some comments.
Let's go around the room and we'll go through, each of us probably have some comments or
I'm really
statements
torn.
we'd like to address.
You know, I'm very torn. I understand all of the arguments, and I'm very torn. That's all I can say.
Do you have any additional comments or anything
No,
that you'd like to add?
Can I ask Hank a question?
Sure. Absolutely. We can have a dialogue with
Sure,
you.
yeah, Hank, can you just confirm that from a zoning standpoint, that the proposed addition and alterations is within the zoning, and then can you elaborate a little bit on, I believe you said you require a variance
Yes.
for some additional square footage?
it's within all these requirements of the structure. He does need a 78 square foot variance for lot coverage.
What is environment?
So are we looking for a definition from the
Yeah,
federal standards?
environment is referred to many times, and it's never defined, so what is environment?
So if we're gonna look to define it, we would look to the federal standards and see if it has a definition for environment. And if it doesn't have a definition in that federal act, then we would look to see if federal case law has taken that term and defined it by case law, which I have not investigated yet. You know, if you want me to research the term, I can look it up right now and see if there is a definition in the federal standards and see if there is not a definition, if there is case law that has made a determination as to how that's defined under the act.
Well, since environment seems to be crucial in this argument and decision, we should have a reliable definition. to
If
what
there
we
is
think.
not one in the act, it would be the general definition of
A reasonable
environment,
definition.
the dictionary definition. But I can check and see if the CFR standards that apply here have a definition of environment.
Can I ask one more question? Is that possible? This whole discussion is brought up. It's important. May I ask a question? Just one question. Since we have the city attorney here, I am concerned that some board members are taking into consideration, the historical review board is taking into consideration the viewpoint of a neighbor who would rather not have a house that's within all the height restrictions and setback restrictions, but that they're taking that into consideration in approving our historical design that meets that. And could you clarify what they're supposed to be judging on, and can they use that again? Can that be something they can judge us against? Or how are they instructed to judge us? I guess is what
Are
I'm,
you asking me?
with regard to that. Can
Well,
she answer that?
Let me ask a
Yes.
question,
Okay.
maybe this will help some things. So, and I'm gonna try to explain what I think is some things, and you'll correct me. So, it's my understanding that zoning ordinances govern bulk area requirements for our community. So bulk area requirements are things such as lot coverages, gross square footages, and the zoning ordinance, which also establishes setbacks, and the intent of those ordinances are to allow for proper access to light and all the other things. And they're based in proper planning principles and density. That the zoning ordinance is the governing thing that does or does not allow additions. And I guess that's one thing I'd ask. The second thing, go ahead.
Correct, the size and setback of additions to houses would be governed by the zoning ordinance. You have specific standards for how far you have to be set back off lot lines, how much of a lot can be covered. Those are specific rules set forth in the zoning ordinance.
And in our community zoning ordinances allow additions on properties, so that is also something that governs whether or not additions can or can't be added to homes.
The size of additions, as far as setbacks and lot coverage, would be governed by the zoning ordinance. And then the standards where you're looking at massing, it's more of a broad rule, whether is it consistent with the overall size of the house that it's being attached to, is it consistent with the.
So there's a minor nuance to that. The historic district standards that we're following do not disallow additions. That is not the purpose of what we're doing. We're trying to gauge whether or not the addition meets the guidelines, not whether or not it is allowed to exist. That addition, whether it's allowed to exist, is governed by zoning ordinances.
Correct. Well, the historic district standards that you have here, that they specifically allow for additions. They talk about if there's an addition proposed, this is how you should take a look at it to make sure it's consistent with the existing historical structure that you're adding it onto. So it does take into consideration that there will be additions. And when you're talking about the size and the permission of additions, you're looking at our zoning ordinance for specific, where can it be, how big can it be?
Did I get to what you were trying to ask?
Kind of, and then it is, so within there, the decision is based on the standards and not on, I don't know what the word is, whether it's,
Subjective opinion?
subjective opinion of of the neighbor.
So
per se.
correct, the size of it that's permitted for an addition on a house is governed by the zoning ordinance. So that you're looking at sort of as a separate issue as far as factual setbacks and factual size. When you're looking at this, more general broad standard of the historical standards, you're looking at, is the massing appropriate in scale to what's there? That type of massing. You don't have, your historical standards don't have X number of sizes permitted, X number of sizes not permitted. It's a broader rule than that. It's more to be looked at, why do you think the mass is not appropriate? What are your reasons that you think the mass is not consistent with the existing structure? And you have to give a list of, the intent is, you give us a list of reasons why you think the mass is not appropriate for what is, with respect to or consistent with what is there already. If you're looking at, is it allowed by zoning ordinance? Our zoning ordinance has specific rules that say whether it is or is not allowed. And if it is allowed under our zoning ordinance, you can't take that same reasoning and say it's not allowed under these rules.
So the,
So hopefully that addresses your questions.
right, so that those arguments are taken up at ZBA, not at historical.
Well,
And that-
the lot coverage issue, the 78 square foot, is not an issue that we rule upon, correct?
The view of a neighbor looking across your property and not wanting to see an addition, that point is not something that the board should even consider. That's what I'm trying to establish, that the historical board should be looking at the historical design as it
Now we're
relates to
getting
the
into
house
nuances
and not
well.
as it,
So
I just want to be clear on that,
So
that gets
if we're
taken up
gonna
at
do this-
ZBA.
So-
Then we're gonna have to allow
So
others to speak as well.
without
So
getting
I
a
don't-
dialogue with the public,
Correct.
what the commission is charged with is looking at these standards that are broad general standards set forth in 36 CFR 67.7 and seeing if the proposal meets these standards. And whether the public comments of the public provide them any facts to add to that, they consider those facts. If they feel those facts are make a difference to the standards, are relevant to the standards, provide any, logic to what the standards are saying. So just like all the board members can make comments, whether they think, based on this fact, we think it doesn't meet the standard, the public has the same right to make those comments. It's just how you then weigh them. Do you believe that that's a valid point, or do you not? That you weigh those comments the same as you weigh comments of the board members.
I have a question, Hank. Do you know approximately how many houses in that area of York have additions?
I do not, I don't have that information.
Well, in terms of the character of the neighborhood, I think that's a very relevant factor.
This house has an addition.
I guess, so now this is my, okay, do you have something that you would like to? No, I know, I'm just, sorry,
And I understand.
I'm not very good.
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
It would be appropriate to let.
Okay, I don't wanna have a free-for-all, because that's not the intent, but I think I owe you.
There's a lot of moving parts, and I understand. And I want to make certain that everyone is looking at this from the same perspective that I and my client are. I'm going to try and go in order as these issues were presented. A couple things, Mr. Fink. My client has never objected to the lack of notice. He has never.
Yes, he did.
Can I finish, please?
He complained about
It's
that.
not a dialogue, please. Let's be respectful, not have a.
May I finish?
Please do.
Please do.
Thank you. He has never objected to lack of notice. When he came here the first time, the issue was he knew about this hearing, flew back from Ireland, and came back the next day. So there was no issue about notice. There's no thing that says he didn't know about this ahead of time. So that needs to be dismissed entirely because it's not accurate. It's moot. The second argument, when we were here the first time talking about air, space, view, has been rescinded. I haven't made that argument since I was here the first time. And the first time we were here, the applicant withdrew their application. So it's a moot point. Pardon me?
I recognize it.
Right, but you keep talking about it. You keep talking
Okay,
about it.
this has.
That being said, the third part, and I want to say the third part is we understand that there is a size issue that needs to be addressed before the zoning board. we will bring that issue up before them. That is not part of our argument. That is not part of our objection. That has nothing to do with what we are here for today. The issue, frankly, is how this addition is going to interface with the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood, the environment, the adjacent property owners. That is the heart of our argument, in that we believe that this modification to this house is going to alter the aesthetic, the historical nature of that property, as well as the environment, which I believe, broadly defined, includes adjacent properties. And you can disagree, but that is my belief. That is my position, and it can be yours as well. You don't have to be married to one particular definition. It is your view. It is your definition of what environment is and how that modification is going to impact surrounding property owners. That's all I had, unless there's other questions for me that are not hypotheticals. Thank you.
I can get back to the environment issue. It's not defined in the federal, the Act, and the CFR, and I don't see any notes of decisions under the definition, section 67.2. So this term environment, you're looking at a standard dictionary definition of what environment is.
And that is?
Whatever dictionary definition, whatever dictionary definition you can find it to be.
Okay, I just want to make sure I don't, give you a minute. I don't want to bypass you.
Make a comment while we're waiting.
Sure, please.
I'd just like to reiterate that maybe clarify my comment from prior, that the removal of the two non-conforming, non-historic additions, and the now accessibility of the garage for cars, in my opinion, far outweighs the impact from a visual standpoint on the neighborhood, on the street, on the neighbor from with the new addition. This is in my opinion, a corrective act to this house, rather than one that is going to detract from it in a historic manner.
This may not be the greatest definition.
I hope it's not Wikipedia.
But it is not Wikipedia. The natural world as a whole, or in a particular geographical area, especially as affected by human activity. That's pretty broad.
Which, the intent of these standards is to be broad because they're meant to be applicable all over the country, which has all different types of environments for you to define an environment.
It would be fair to say that the Cyber residence, its environment would be Huntington Woods.
You would have to give your reasons for that. I can't tell you. It's your
It could be the
interpretation
street it's
of
on.
the standard based on your factual reasoning. So you would just put your reasons on the record based on why you think it's that way, and that's your argument. That's your basis for your argument.
Got it.
Do you have additional comments, Robert?
I do not, thank you. I do have a question. Jim, you referred to two additions?
Yeah, so there's the octagonal addition on
Right.
the first floor and the shed dormer on the second.
We don't know that
We
that's
don't
an
know
addition.
that.
We don't know.
Did
We
you have the
we don't have that
original plans?
codified. Again, as I stated in my earlier opinion, I cannot imagine that is a
They wouldn't have taken it off
original
the ridge
part
like
of,
that.
that is an original part of the house. That's my opinion.
It's all
just
new
don't know.
material.
Whenever you
I'm
see
not
a shed
recommending
coming out of the ridge like
Got
that,
it.
you know it's not
Multiple times.
historical. If you see it coming off the ridge like that, I could be wrong.
We just don't know.
We don't know.
I
So it's fair to
haven't
say we
seen
don't
a
know.
historical
Can I get the
addition.
plans so we
100 years ago, they didn't build
Solve that?
the dormers like that.
Can we
The
go down
cedar
to the
siding is
plans?
in my garage, which I can't
All
imagine
the-
would be there since
Just because the siding
1928.
is on the outside of the house has been changed out,
And all the
doesn't mean the
material.
original shed dormer wasn't original. I mean, we don't
So-
know that,
so at
that's why
this
I'm
point-
asking, can we
yeah.
get the plans out of the
I
file?
mean, like, right now?
Yeah, we used to do that.
Mr. Chair, do you wanna have a recess? Or do you wanna go on and get the comments from the board and then I'll get the plans?
I would prefer that.
Assuming we have
Yeah,
them.
and then we can maybe look back on that. would you like to address and have some comments?
Okay, I guess for my money, I thought I'm here because it's a historic district and it's my charge to protect it. I know what we went through to establish it, and I'm well aware of the interpretation of the guidelines, since I was one of the original members. And I don't need anybody to tell me how to think about this. I am concerned about any addition put on this house, because this is a cornerstone house for our historic district. The Kahn House, the Saarinen House, and by the way, I'll remind those of us who were here from the beginning that we said no to the Saarinen House for the exact same reason, that it was an important part of the historic district. So I really, and I would like to compliment Ben, because he's done a tremendous job trying to fit within the confines of what he has to work with here. I think he's probably come up with the best solution possible. I'm just not convinced that any addition on this house is something that is going to improve the historic district. I feel like this house should not be touched because it was built by an architect who's world famous, very important, and for his parents, for a time in their lives. And that is part of the historic integrity of the district itself, looking at why things were back then when things were built. So those are some of the things that I consider to be important as I make my decision, which I haven't made yet. In terms of spatial relationship, it's a small house on a small lot. I think adding on to the house interferes with the integrity of the spatial relationship, the environment of the whole district. And the more we let things change in the district, the more we erode the integrity of the historic district. So I'm more of a preservationist.
Are you done, Martha? I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Are you done?
I think so.
Steve, please.
Really don't know what to add, other than, if I read the notes here that Hank has provided, that you approved the addition that was on there.
Right.
Which
Why
is-
compound a mistake?
Well,
When
I wanna
we-
tell you
when
something,
we
by
originally-
removing it, we're doing, I think that we're.
Right.
You're correcting that.
We're
True.
doing, I think that we're doing the property owners and the neighbors and the district a favor. I think that
I agree.
my comments stand that I think it's a fantastic addition, and I think that it upholds the integrity of the historic district, the integrity of the intent of the standards and guidelines that apply, and I think that the applicant and the applicant's representative, Mr. Heller, have had patience beyond what could be considered reasonable, and coming back and coming back and coming back again, changing the plan every time to accommodate maybe not every concern of everybody, but a lot of the concerns. And by the comments of some of the board members indicating that no addition could ever be put on a house, I think flagrantly does not adhere to the flavor of what the I think that the historic district guidelines established presumed that there were going to be changes to properties. I think that they presumed it. And to say that this should never have a change, I think, is a violation of the integrity of the standards. And I think it's, I think that it's totally inconceivable unless, in my mind, that's all I got to say.
I guess I would second Steve's belief that the U.S. Department of Interior never intended to prevent changes to historic structures. In fact, most of what they did was to protect the overall character of the neighborhood and give them a new life as things change, as technologies change, as lifestyles change, and to make sure that these important treasures are well utilized and as part of our community. I'll go back to just focus on the standards. I firmly believe that this is a very nicely designed addition for all the things I've talked about in terms of massing, materiality, sensitivity, and that I'll specifically call out guidelines 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 9, that this addition does a terrific job of meeting those objectives and would be a tremendous asset to this district. Obviously, are there any additional comments from the commission before we close the comments?
Yeah, I'd like to address Martha's argument, which I find very cogent, and I understand your reasons. But there's a flaw in your argument. And I'm going to read this again. A project meets the standards when the overall effect of the work on the property is one of consistency with the property's historic character. Now, we're talking about the property,
Right.
not the designer. If this was designed by somebody else, there wouldn't be any question whatsoever, except to Robert, about whether it's appropriate.
Thank you. Consider that a compliment.
How does an addition that cannot even be seen from the street affect the architectural character of the property? Can you explain that?
I think it's pretty obvious. If you put something on the back of a house, that changes the way it looks.
Not if you can't see it.
Why wouldn't we be able to see it?
Because
The neighbors will be able to see it. You'll be able to see it from the
There's
street.
only one neighbor is
There's
upset
no
about it.
setback. Not like the setbacks we did way back in the day, the 24-inch setback that blocked down on York.
Are you kidding? I've got less than 4 feet between my house and the property line in the back.
But I remember spending a lot of time that night talking to those people, and they accepted that setback. So, you know, we've got a lot of history here on the commission. And you know, I'm brand new back again, so obviously the members have changed and things have changed. I'm just going by what I remember and what I know to be true in terms of interpreting the guidelines.
And I'm going.
Am I saying that there should be no addition on this house? Maybe a smaller addition would look better and in keeping with the size and the proportion of the house. And I look at that from an artistic standpoint, that's all. And I said that at the very beginning. So, last meeting, I wasn't here for the first meeting. So, does that help?
Nope.
Well, you know what? I look at things differently. I'm an artist. I've been an art teacher for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And,
See,
I'm into architecture, and I study it, and I teach it to my kids. And so I have a different point of view, and that's why we have 9 people on the board, so we can listen to everybody's points of view. I listened to what you had to say.
Chris, have something
Well, like I
to
said, I
say.
think you made a cogent argument,
I have something
not a
to
good
say.
one. I think it's flawed, but it's a cogent argument, and I accept it.
Okay.
Robert, please.
Thank you. I don't want to be misunderstood. I think that Mr. Heller's work on the project is admirable. It's good work. There's no question about it. Is it good work for this house is my position. Is this a house that you can actually add onto successfully without creating any damage in any way? And I don't know if you can. My objections to this project hinge on compatibility and appropriateness, impact, sight lines, and the comprehensive package attaching to the back of the property and how it's viewed from all angles. I think the work you did is great, but I don't think that every house can be addressed successfully. Some houses just can't mess with sometimes. I think the original addition was just an abomination. It should never have happened. Yeah, I mean, that's about it.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, at this point in time, if you did want to call a recess, and it was the pleasure of the commission, I could go look and see if the plans are still down there. That's up to you.
Does everybody
Move for
still
recess.
would like to have that verified?
Well, we should know.
Okay, then I just wanted to
It'd
ask.
be a 5-minute recess, Mr. Chairman. At this point in time, all discussion should cease about the project.
Okay.
And we'll take a 5-minute intermission.
Great, thanks, Hank.
In the meeting,
We have to reconvene.
1928.
So there was, there, so you called it. Tiny little, there was a tiny little dormer at one point in time, so the full width dormer is indeed, well, I should wait, is the audio back in? And are we reconvened yet?
That's up
Are we
to you.
official?
You have to say it.
you have to reconvene.
I would like
So
to,
it's not original.
reconvene the Historic District Commission meeting. Thank you, Hank, for getting the drawings, and we certainly can let people look at these, but according to these drawings, the full width dormer on the back of the house was indeed an addition. Anybody else want to look at this? These plans, I think, were dated 1927, is that?
28.
28, sorry, 28, oh. There we go, 1928. Thank you, Hank. I'm glad these survived the flood. I didn't know you've got them all.
The Y is higher up than the bottom row.
Okay. So based on, well, thank you for that information. So at this point in time, do we want to close the Historic District comments here? Anybody else have anything else before we close it? No. So at this point in time, that'll be closed, and so we are looking to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Is there discussion, or we just?
You're supposed to have discussion on it.
Is there any discussion for the motion?
Do we need to add any, standards that it meets?
That would be helpful to clarify the motion. There's some there, and there's a couple on the backside.
Actually, it has to meet all the standards, so
Yeah, I mean,
does it or doesn't it meet all
that's a
the
good question. In my mind, it meets the standard.
You have to say which number.
Motion to approve based on all this, based on the Secretary of Interior standards. In whole.
Isn't there something you have to say with regard to the zoning?
Mr. Chairman, if you're going to make the motion for that, and I'm just directing through you to you, it would be subject to the zoning board of appeals approval of 78 square feet.
Would you be amenable to amend it to add the provision that it still needs a zoning variance of 78 square feet?
I would.
In the second,
That's lot coverage?
That is the lot area coverage.
the second would also have to accept that.
I can't remember who's second. Mr. Fink, do you accept that amendment?
To include the lot coverage as an amendment to the motion.
Yes. Okay, so we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did you catch for that?
We got.
All in favor, could you raise your hands again, whoever's in favor?
I'm gonna abstain.
So all those opposed, none, and one
You
abstain.
can't abstain, you have to take a position.
So, all those opposed? Do I have to redo the vote then?
Oh, you haven't counted mine yet, okay.
Okay, all those opposed? So we have one, so the motion passes.
I love you guys.
Thank you, Mr.
Great.
Chair.
So, Hank, is there any, let me take a look at our agenda, please. Is there any other business this evening?
At this point in time, there is no other business. This will move on to the zoning board of appeals. And again, everybody will be re-noticed for the zoning board of appeals, and that'll take place for the December meeting. And I will report back to the Historic District Commission what the results of that are.
So there's not a responsibility of the commission to appear at the zoning.
There is not. They will be provided with minutes for this.
So,
I hope you understand, it's just, you know, I'm like,
so at this point in time,
there's one here
can we just, Mr. Howard, we just finish up? We just have a few things. I just wanna finish this up.
It was because it
Mr. Chair, that's all that we have for the evening.
I do have to ask, is there anybody else for public participation? Isn't that on our agenda?
That is correct.
Seeing none,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, aye, we're done. No, he probably just didn't see it.